Lee at southeastern14.com, joined by a good friend of mine in the sports media business. He is Jay Tate. If you are an Auburn fan and you're not on his site, you either don't know about it or you've lost his mind, or you've lost your mind maybe, because Jay is the best in the business at covering Auburn, a good dude. Jay, thanks for joining us today at what is just a fun time for Auburn basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I don't know. I mean, Auburn was really good. Like, see, 99 and 2000, they were decent in 03, but I think this team is probably, and right now, at least at this part of the season, is the best they've ever had, ever.
They were, I want to say, were they never ranked number one? I felt like they were.
Never were. They were like a preseason number one in Sports Illustrated,
I
but
remember. Yeah.
in the AP poll, I think two is as high as they've been, and they're two right now. So pretty
Wes
good.
Flanagan was on that team, wasn't he?
Let's see. No, it was just
Okay.
after he had left, so it was Chris Porter and those guys.
Okay. It's a real time warp thing to see Wes Flanagan's kid playing on Auburn's team.
Yeah, you're
Uh,
right.
both are really good players, but this has got to be a crazy week for you. Your basketball worlds are sort of intersecting here with your
Uh,
Kentucky roots.
that is true. I have a graduate degree from University of Kentucky, but man, I left there in '98, and I've been down here at Auburn since '98. So it just feels like a lifetime ago. It's more than half of my life ago, and yeah, I don't know. I just don't feel a kinship with Kentucky anymore. It's just been so long, and all of my friends from there are gone, and some of them are on Facebook here talking some smack, but generally I more or less defend Auburn. I just got in the habit of it.
Well, if we had told 1998 Jay Tate that Auburn and Kentucky would be playing a basketball game in Auburn with the eyes of the college basketball world on it in 2022, how would you have felt
Yeah,
about that?
that would have surprised me because
Yeah.
at that time Kentucky was on top of the world. The 3 years I was covering them, 96, 97, 98, they played in the national title game all three of those years, won two of them. So, and then here's Auburn, who's they were okay, not too bad. So the idea that Auburn is now like this top echelon team with tons of depth and some star players and a great coach is baffling. I mean, it's not even really that based on what was going on in the '90s. It was what was going on 8 years ago. I mean,
Yeah.
Auburn was horrible, truly one of the worst basketball teams. And I know Vanderbilt's had a couple stinkers here lately. This team is not, but a couple years ago, well, not so good. But Auburn was bad, year after year after year. And I thought it was FUBAR, man. I thought there was no way out. And BP, they kind of got BP in a situation where he couldn't go anywhere else. He was on
Yeah.
that show cause from Tennessee, and they picked him up, and they did everything that they could to make him happy and to do the things that he thought they needed him to do, and here we are.
I remember, I believe this was 2017. Uh, Auburn was playing in Nashville. I was at the game. I was doing media stuff. And I remember walking by the locker room in the Auburn locker room. And my dog is very excited about this game, as you may be able to hear.
Oh yeah,
Um, yeah, Oreo's a big college basketball fan, evidently. But yeah, I remember walking by the locker room and just thinking the paint was going to peel off. And at that point, they'd had two losing seasons and they were headed for an 18 and 14 year. And I was just thinking, man, I don't know that this is going to work for him. And then a year later, he turned it around. What was the story there?
uh, I just changing players, and I think getting a better feel for what he needs to get done at Auburn. Those first few teams that he had at Auburn, hell, the years I don't remember anymore. Maybe 15, 16, 17, something like that. He was taking some kids that were kind of on the outside of the college basketball world. Some transfers that maybe, weren't the highest quality kids, but who could play a little bit of ball, and took Auburn from being the worst team in the SEC to just, okay. And then gradually over time, he was able to start being a little more choosy with the kids that he brought in. And I think these last 3 or 4 recruiting classes, maybe 5 if you go back that far, have been really good. And he gets a good mix of great players and good kids and people that just fit his system. There's a certain kind of player I think that works best with BP. It's somebody who is exuberant and can communicate their opinions. Some coaches don't like kids like that. Some coaches just want people that keep their heads down and dig. And I don't necessarily think that BP would turn people away like that, but he likes people who challenge him appropriately And he's got a team full of those kids right now. And it's not surprising to me, based on the personalities of those kids, that they're actually really good basketball team.
Yeah, you talk about the state they were in. I was looking something up on my phone to make sure I was right. It was like he took over for Tony Barbee, which seems
Yeah.
like that was like it's almost like it never happened at this point.
Yeah, that's the way that Auburn feels about him too. They like to pretend like Tony Barbie never happened. Yeah, just completely different. I mean, back in those days, Barbie would pick up a 3-star and it was like, "Hey guys, we really did something," and you're like, "Wow, congratulations!" And then now, BP's essentially only going after 5-stars, and sometimes he'll slip up a little bit and see a 4-star he likes. It really just couldn't be any different, and it's just, to me, what makes BP great is he's just got this personality that makes you want to be better just being around him. And I find that it affects me too, because I just go to practice and talk to him some here and there and everywhere, and he makes me want to write better stuff. I mean, he just when you're around him, you can't help but be like that. He just has this infectious personality, very positive. When he crawls ass, you know it, but then he always backs it up and says something nice too. So he just has this incredible personality, and I think that's why he's been so good all these years. He had a tough start. He kind of got blackballed there for some stuff that he did as an assistant at University of Iowa back in the '80s. But the opportunities that he's been given, starting at Southern Indiana and now up to where we are today, I think he's taken full advantage of that and really become a much, much better man than he was before.
Well, here's the thing, too, Jay. I mean, everybody said you're just not going to get people at Auburn interested in basketball because football is king. And by the way, you're seeing this at Alabama too, right? Alabama is drawing fans like crazy for games. People are very engaged. We get a ton of audience from Auburn and Alabama basketball on our stuff at Southeastern 14. But it's, I mean, people could say, well, they're winning, and sure, people are showing up because they're number one or number two or wherever they will be on Monday. But that wasn't a given that even if you turn it around, that wasn't an automatic you build it and they will come.
No, definitely not. I mean, I think there were times early on when he was frustrated and he was concerned about, is this going to actually work? And then he just had a couple recruits go his way. To me, as Mustafa Heron was the big one. He was
Yeah.
he wasn't the first 5-star, but he was the one where they got him and you thought, oh, this dude can really play. And he kind of built from there. I think once Mustafa came in, they started adding a couple more recruiting classes to supplement him, and that's when it got really going. But it was not easy. I'm afraid that, like, 20 years from now, when they're looking back on the Pearl era, they're going to be like, dude, that dude just showed up and everything changed. And I'm here to tell you that it didn't. It took time. It took 3 years of really grinding and some tough teams. They weren't all that good. He did eventually get it going, and I think it's just a matter of convincing these kids, these high school kids, that Auburn is worth your time. But now that he's got Chuma, Sharif, the guy with the Cavaliers, Isaac Okoro,
Mm-hmm.
now that he can show you, hey, I'm putting kids in the league, and now of course Jabari is potentially a number 1 overall pick. Now the kids know, and it's easier, I guess you could say.
Before we get into the Kentucky matchup and some specifics with the team, what is the basketball atmosphere like in that state? Because, like I said, it looks to me from the outside up here in the Nashville area that it is just red hot down there. You see full stands for both teams at their games. Students are engaged. Twitter is engaged. It just seems like it is really electric down there for both the school you cover as well as Alabama.
Yeah, I don't necessarily notice it as much at Alabama, but I mean, I live in Montgomery, which is, I don't know, I'm a lot closer to Auburn than I am Alabama, and I don't pay much attention to the Bam Bams, so I can't really speak to that. They are competitive. I know that Nate Oates has done a terrific job over there, actually making sense of what they have. They have more basketball heritage than Auburn does, to their credit, and I think they've done a really nice job of recruiting and kind of getting their thing going. But Auburn beat them over there, maybe 2 weeks ago now. That's a big win for Auburn, and so I don't know. I don't necessarily think that Alabama's quite in that group. I think you're looking at Auburn and Kentucky in the top group of the SEC right now. Maybe Texas A&M. They've only got 1 loss right now. They might be in there. I still think Arkansas has got a chance to be good. Tennessee's pretty good as well. So the state of Alabama certainly is a place where 2 of the best teams in the league are. But And I think Auburn's white hot. I just don't necessarily know that Tuscaloosa is.
I see the pecking order in the league like this right now, and I'll start from both ends. I think you've got at the top Auburn and Kentucky, 1A and 1B, however you
Mm-hmm.
decide it. Maybe tomorrow adds some clarity. Maybe it's a toss up at the buzzer, in which case it probably doesn't. I think you've got LSU at 3. Then you've got Alabama, Tennessee in some order. One has issues defending, the other one has issues scoring. Then you've got A&M, Mississippi State, Arkansas, Florida, and then you've got the bottom 5, which would be Vandy, Georgia, Ole Miss, Carolina, Missouri. I really think you've got 9 decent to good teams with 2 or 3 at the top that are separated in that middle layer that's pretty good, still top 25 ranked, and then a lot of teams that are going to be battling for an NCAA tournament bid. And I think the tournament may be really important this year.
Yeah, for sure. You got those teams like Florida, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, maybe that need to be good in February and March and try to get their way in. I've been impressed with Vanderbilt, just kind of getting themselves straightened out a little bit after last year.
Yeah.
And Scottie Pippen is a guy that he's a stud. I was thinking that he might have gone in the portal last year, but he did not.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great news for Vanderbilt. Yeah, I see it more or less that same way. I mean, Auburn, Kentucky to me are in the top. I'm gonna go ahead and hold on to Texas A&M until they prove me wrong. I think they're pretty good. I know that they had a really hot start, and some people are saying, kind of a fluky start. They got they got Kentucky at home, and they lost it, and fair enough. I'm not as big on LSU as some are. Maybe that's because I think Will Wade's a clown. Maybe infecting my brain on that. And I think Mississippi State, Tennessee, Alabama, Arkansas, to me, are right there in a nice cluster. It's a good situation for the SEC as far as basketball, though, because 8 years ago or so, Slive was the one that was like, guys, at the spring meetings was like, listen, this cannot be a football conference only. We need to have the investment put into basketball. And I think the teams have come through. I mean, Georgia, you could argue maybe not quite as much, but the other teams have. Mississippi's in a beautiful new arena. Auburn is 10 years old now, believe it or not, but Auburn Arena is a great place to watch basketball. And, a lot of these other teams have hired great coaches. I mean, Mississippi State, Ben Howland, I mean, that's a great hire, and everybody's got a legit coach now. So, they did what he said, and what he predicted has occurred. That the SEC is now a legit basketball conference. And as somebody myself who grew up in a basketball home, unfortunately, my parents were Louisville fans, and I grew up liking the Cardinals, but we watched basketball over football always. And so for me, it's great to see the SEC becoming what it is in basketball.
Tell me if I'm connecting dots here that don't need to be connected, but I'm thinking that Bruce Pearl has had a lot to do with Tom Crean's lack of success, given what he's done in the Atlanta market. Is that fair or not?
I think there's enough, believe it or not, there's enough kids in Atlanta, I think, to still let Georgia be better than they are, because they're horrible right now. Yeah. I just think Tom Crean's lost something or didn't have it or something. I mean, at Marquette, he was really good. That was 15 years ago, and then in Indiana, he was a little bit worse. And now here, he's just bad. He's abjectly bad. So I do think that BP being able to come in there and peel off a lot of kids out of Georgia does affect the University of Georgia, no doubt. But they're still dudes, and they end up going places other than Auburn and Georgia. Like Wheeler is playing for Kentucky now, and that's a good example. They're going everywhere, not just Auburn.
I watch Auburn. It's hard to find a weakness. I'm not crowning them national champions yet. I'm not even sure that they're the better team of Auburn and Kentucky, which could be the top 2 teams.
How dare you say that, sir?
It's blasphemy. I know. The listeners may not like that, but we call them as we see them here at the 14. But I watched them play at times, and I really don't think, and this is one thing I said about Auburn a couple of weeks ago, Jay. Watching them play a couple of weeks ago at the level they did, you see teams play at that level. You don't see them play at that level in early January because the pieces haven't clicked yet. You've got the Flanagan factor where, he's come back. I don't know if he was always 100%. Some nights he plays a lot. Some nights he didn't. He seems like he's getting more into the lineup now. They have found answers without him anyway. To see a team play at a high level as soon as they did, to me, that's not something you see that often.
Yeah, I agree. What's funny is that last year I thought they were going to be pretty good. This is like during the summer. I'm talking about the summer of, I guess, 2020. I thought they were going to be pretty good. They had Sharif Cooper coming in. It was a great recruit out of Atlanta. And then they did the self-imposed violation where they took away their own postseason. That's a whole separate show, probably, of how Auburn kind of eluded a major punishment on that whole deal, whereas we're waiting on LSU to get even a slap on the wrist. Just wondering if that's ever going to happen. But I thought last year's Auburn team was going to be really good, and it sucked. They had a lot of trouble, and they really foundered down the stretch. And so you come in this year, and you're thinking, is it possible that he can take all the problems they had last year and actually turn everything around? With Jabari Smith being the crown jewel, will he be able to get enough dudes around Jabari? And the bottom line is he did. He addressed all of their major concerns with stuff that he got in the portal, specifically perimeter defense. And with Walker Kessler, you've got basically that's a defensive paradigm in one person. The way he protects the rim and swats shots and is actually able to retain possession after a lot of those swats. You add those guys in, and all of a sudden he's got the chemistry, the players, he's got his personality, and everything's just clicking right for Auburn right now. And I don't see a weakness either. I really don't. I just don't even know what to say really. I mean, sometimes they get a little rattled by zone pressure. Ole Miss had some success doing that. Georgia had a little bit of success opening the second half of the game with some of that 1-1-3 pressure. I'm sure if you're going to get real deep in the weeds and try to find a way to really vex Auburn, you would do something like that. But eventually they get out of it. And so it's going to have to take more than just we'll unload this 2-3 zone on them or whatever. You've got to really play games.
I guess if you wanted to pick nits, you might say they don't have a top flight marksman like a John Jenkins or a Chris Lofton or some of the epic shooters we've seen in this league. But I look around, and other than maybe Kellen Grady, who's been on a little bit of a slide lately, I'm not sure anybody does.
Yeah, they do have. I mean, so last year they didn't have any shooters. This year they have several shooters. They really only have one elite one, which is Jabari, which is crazy to even think about. That Their 6'10" power forward is their best 3-point shooters at 44% right now for the season, which is great. But they just have a lot of dudes who are willing to shoot and to shoot in the 35 to 37 range. Wendell Green is the one that kind of melts my brain because he's the point guard. He's the backup point guard technically, but he plays a bunch of minutes. Little number one, and they picked him up from Eastern Kentucky. And the thing that blows my mind about him is that he is better the deeper he shoots. This is no joke. When he's shooting from three, like right on the line, he's like 32%. But when he's shooting from 26 feet, he's like 40%. And it's like the further away he gets, the more accurate he is. And this is baffling to me. I love watching him shoot because it's just like he's figured this out and he just pulls from 25 feet, 30 feet, doesn't care.
Back to the big guys, I feel like, and you don't see this all, I feel like Auburn kind of brings you back to the early 1990s where you had Shaquille O'Neal and Stanley Roberts. I mean, they're different guys. You had Mourning and Mutombo at Georgetown. You don't see two bigs. And I know Jabari Smith obviously can get out and play on the perimeter, so it's different. But you just don't see many teams with two bigs like that anymore. It's been a long time.
I don't know how I feel about that because Shaq. I know you're just kind of bringing him up.
We're
Just kind
spitballing
of
here,
yeah, spitballing. I mean, Shaq was such a big dude. He's more like an Oscar
right.
Tshiebwe type guy, and
Not an exact comp, but it's the point is you have to really reach to go back to find two dominant big guys who can protect the rim on the same team because that's just not the way college basketball is constructed, I guess is a better way to
you're
say
right.
it.
These days, I feel like the Warriors, maybe 10 years ago, start going to the positionless concept. And I don't think Auburn has fully implemented that, but it's definitely affected by it. I think a lot of teams are. And so you're actually looking for centers that shoot threes. Now, hell, Walker shot 27 threes this year. He's a 7'1" center. Now, he's only hit 14%, so maybe he'd want to ease back on that a little bit. But nonetheless, everybody's shooting. And my question really in going into this UK game is, so Oscar Tshiebwe is such a physical presence. He, to me, is more like the Shaquille O'Neal guy you were talking about who just bullies people, And I'm interested to see if Auburn can counter that because I don't think Walker Kessler, as good as he is, he's not really a physical center. He's an aggressive center, but he's not really physical. And it seems like it would play better for their backup forward, Devin Cardwell, that plays center too. More of a physical dude, more of a bouncy dude. I'm interested to see how effective UK can be in slowing Oscar down because they just haven't seen anybody like this before.
Well, here's what I think is interesting about that matchup, Jay. Bigs get in foul trouble. I think officials get pretty whistle happy on those guys at times, and you lose a guy underneath. He's got to sit out 7, 8 minutes in an evenly matched game a lot of times. That can really tilt things. And I'm not saying Auburn is a better team. I think it might be. I think it probably is. Again, we'll find out. But I look at Auburn, and Auburn's got three guys underneath, and Kentucky's got Sheboy, and they've got some other guys too. Toppin has played really well for him at times. I don't know if he's as big as those other guys, but I think that's where numbers might tilt it in Auburn's favor because the odds are one guy on the court is going to get in foul trouble as a big guy for one of those two teams. Couldn't tell you who it's going to be, but just when you watch games like that, it happens a lot, and that to me is really probably going to help Auburn in the postseason too.
You would think so, yeah. They're pretty dang good about staying out of foul trouble. So Jabari's really good. He's like a ninja.
Yes.
He can play 30 minutes and really not have foul trouble. Part of that's because he doesn't necessarily challenge shots a lot, even though he's tall and long and somewhat bouncy. He's not a big shot blocker. So that's a thing with him. You don't really have to worry about him with fouls. Now Walker for sure. Walker is one of those guys that just goes all the time on the defensive end. I feel like his real passion is defense, and he's going to have to be careful in this game. When he goes out, that's when Dylan Cardwell comes in, and Dylan Cardwell has essentially no offensive value, but he's a real marauder on the defensive end. So I'm looking forward to seeing if they get into a situation where Dylan has to play more because Walker's in foul trouble. Kind of how they handle that, and you have to change the scoring emphasis to somebody else. They've done that. They did it against Florida. They did that against Alabama. Didn't really have much trouble, but Kentucky's a different animal. Really looking forward to this, dude. I cannot tell you how insane the situation is at Auburn Arena right now. I mean, the kids were camped out yesterday to get in line for the student section. They have like an entire camp tenement situation going on in front of the stadium right now. I mean, there's probably 500 kids out there in tents. It's going to be cold and moist tonight. I don't know if it's going to be raining, but it'll be unpleasant. And they're out there, dude. They're out there. It feels like you're at Duke or something. And this is just crazy that Auburn is in this situation.
I saw a photo of kids hauling a leather couch.
Well, I like couches.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd haul a leather couch out in the cold and the rain, but I'm not in college right now either. So
I had some couch experience when I was in college, brother.
Tim Couch or otherwise?
No, we brought I was going to Transylvania University, and we brought couches when Transy played our hated rivals, the Center College Colonels, and we just put them right along the sideline and threw popcorn at the soccer players, and the university president came down and threw us off campus. He's a turd. Michael Adams, who ended up being the president of Georgia.
Georgia, sure did. Okay. Again, I go back to how versatile. One thing that I like about them, they can really get KD Johnson and Wendell Green out and transition and run too. Which, when you hit a shooting slump, that tends to make it easier when you can get quick buckets.
Yeah, and this is what BP wants to do. I mean, BP, when he was in Tennessee, he got those long dudes that were great in transition. They would get deflections, they'd get out in transition and just run you to death. I think he finally has a team here where he's got the length, he's got the numbers, he's got a little bit of experience, and he went out and recruited guys that were good in the open court. He finally has a team at Auburn that is made in that image, and they are playing like those swashbuckling Tennessee teams of whatever 10 years ago, and they're going to be just as effective. I mean, they didn't have a Jabari Smith, he's a phenomenal player. If you haven't had a chance to see him, I think he's worth a look. He's not the most explosive player you're going to see in college basketball. He won't blow you away with just how jumpy he is and stuff like that, but he's good at every single part of the game. I mean, he's a good rebounder, good shooter, good ball handler, good defender, and he's a great teammate. And he's also just kind of an agent provocateur out there because he's always pissing people off without getting in their face. It's like he just knows how to kind of get under your skin, and I love that about him.
One thing I've noticed in addition to the game, he has got more assists than turnovers, which is really rare for a big man. And a lot of times in a pro prospect, you just look past those things, right? You're like, well, we're looking 5, 10 years down the road with this guy, and we can overlook the things that he doesn't do well. That to me is what puts him over the top as a special player. He doesn't have that one glaring weakness he does or things that might cost you games right now.
Yeah, turnover's not a big deal with him, and he's honestly they have the 2 point guards, Wendell Green and Zip Jaspers, who are their best ball handlers, obviously, but Jabari is their third primary ball handler. I mean, he brings the ball up against the press a lot. They run sets from him uh, fairly often, and it's just amazing that a kid who's 19 years old, true freshman, has the dribbling ability at 6'10", and all the other great things he does to help the team. That he can actually dribble, start sets, execute them, and I would argue he's their best passer too. He's insane. He's just like I said, he's good at every single thing. And for those of you who are older, like Chris and I, his dad played at LSU,
Yeah,
Jabari.
remember
Yeah,
him.
he was there when LSU went to the Final Four, and I think 2000 he was playing with Stromile Swift, and yeah, heck of a player he was. Heck of a player.
That team had some dudes who could run and jump.
Mm-hmm. Telling me, buddy.
A couple more things before I get you out of here. The comp I've heard for Jabari Smith is Kevin Durant, and I think sometimes comps. I mean, like when you start throwing out Hall of Famers, I mean, you kind of snub your nose at that. And I think we all tend to. I think sometimes a comp is a who do they play like? You know, the odds are he's going to end up being something less than Kevin Durant, right? But in terms of stylistically, you know, maybe that's helpful in telling you what kind of guy he is. When you watch him, who do you compare him to?
The guy now, so I don't necessarily. I just started watching the NBA somewhat recently, so I can't give you a bunch of NBA comps, and I usually watch the Thunder for what it's worth. So I'm not seeing a lot of star power, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
However, when I covered Kentucky back in the '90s, there was a guy who played there by the name of Walter McCarty, and he was
yeah,
a 6'9", 6'10" power forward. Now this is back in the era where you expected your power forwards to be back to the basket, nasty guys, and he wasn't because he's more like Jabari. Jabari's better face up, good ball handler, very good 3 point shooter, good free throw shooter. And so to me, Jabari and Walter McCarty are very similar. They also have a similar personality. I think so. Walter, I think, went like 15th in the draft his junior year when he left for the draft. And I just wonder if he was playing in this era where you want your power forwards to be better shooters, because Walter was a better shooter back then, if he would be more coveted now. Because I think there's people that listen to this show and say, Walter McCarty, who gives a dang? Well, he was really good. And he played on a national championship team in 95, 96 that was insane. That Kentucky team was bonkers. And he had a 10 or 15-year NBA career. So yeah, the guy was an incredible player, just kind of out of his time. He got time shifted a little bit. He was in the wrong era, and that's why I think Jabari is more coveted now. And Jabari's better, but similar kinds of players to me.
yeah. And that was probably the last great dynasty in SEC basketball, other than the Florida back-to-back teams. Those Kentucky teams with McCarty and those guys were just, if you weren't around for it, they were unbelievable.
Yeah, and I was fortunate to be right there in it, and it's crazy to look back and think how fortunate I was. It just happened to be popping in right at that time when Patino was really peaking, and then he left for the NBA, and then Tubby Smith got them to the national title in '98 as well. So it's a great way to start my college basketball coverage career. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's all downhill from there, basically. But
Kind of.
I want to ask you about Walker Kessler because,
Sure.
and I may have shared this because we've done a couple things before. And I remember the first time I saw him, he was at a high school tournament in Nashville when he was a junior. And, you know, the team they're playing's got dudes my size and your size in the post, not much more. And he's out there and all he wants to do is shoot threes. Which, by the way, I'll tell you who was sitting courtside. It was Stephen Pearl. And I don't know that Auburn was really in the picture at the time, but maybe helped them on the rebound for sure from Carolina. And I'm just like, I don't know what this guy is because he didn't want to seem to stay in the paint that much. Now, on the defensive end, he's blocking shots like crazy. And he wasn't really an enforcer defensively, I felt at the time like he could be. Well, he's answered that question.
Oh yeah.
Uh, where is he going to settle? I mean, to me, I think I get that every big in the country wants to shoot threes right now, but you mentioned the percentage. I just see him being so effective at what he does. He can handle the ball a little bit when he needs to. I saw him do that on a breakaway the other night. Um, where does that intersect with the NBA? Because I'm just kind of wondering. You know, the NBA looks at you as a work in progress. And he's got these two entirely different approaches to his game. I'm just wondering what all that means for him at Auburn and how much more longer that lasts.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he has a pro career in the NBA for sure. I mean, 7'1", and he's not stiff at all. He has a pretty broad base of skills considering his height. You mentioned the shooting. He does shoot a lot, does not hit a lot from 3-point range. I was out at practice, I guess a week ago Wednesday, and he shot threes after practice for maybe 30 minutes. And I would say, I'm just estimating here, that he probably hit 70% of them. Now, it's a lot different shooting in an open gym against, versus, you're playing in Memorial Gym and trying to go against a team that's trying to defend you. It's a lot different, but he's got that ability. And in the NBA, they're going to want that. It's just, he is limber. He does give you a defensive presence. When they switch, these other teams love trying to switch onto him so they get like a 2 guard on him or a 3 guard on him. And he still gives you a credible defensive performance despite being 7'1". I think he's got a lot of utility. He is a 73% shooter from 2-point range, pretty good free throw shooter. I would expect him to be a better rebounder than he is, particularly on the offensive end. He doesn't seem to have that awareness as much on the offensive end, but he's a great defensive rebounder, a great shot blocker. To me, he's probably a late first round pick, and he's a guy who ends up playing in the league for 12 or 15 years because he's got that height and he's limber. I mean, he's not some stiff like goober who can't do anything. He can do a lot of different stuff, and he's a sharp kid.
Yeah.
And he's, unfortunately for him, he's kind of one of those where he's his own worst enemy. I mean, when he makes a mistake in a game, he just beats himself up over it. And I think he's got to learn, as Ted Lasso would say, to be a goldfish and just forget about it.
Yeah, sometimes smart kids are their own worst enemy. And I remember talking to him in high school. I think he was wanting to go into medical school at some point. I don't know if that's still his goal, but
Well, yeah, he's
that
got that in
tells
his
you,
family.
yeah, right. His
Or
was his
his
dad
dad
a
or his
doctor?
uncle. I think his dad's a doctor and his uncle's a doctor as well, I believe.
His uncle, I think, died of a heart attack a few years ago, didn't he?
He may have more than one.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, the Kesslers are synonymous with SEC hoops. But yeah, that kind of tells you, though, how that kid is wired.
Yes. And he's fun as heck to talk to. He's got a good, like if it's not basketball and you're just kind of talking to him off the court, he seems kind of chill and funny and quips a lot. But man, when he's on that court, he is all business. And if he makes a mistake, he just wants to punch himself and knock himself out. And I feel like he's making progress watching him play these last, let's say, month. I feel like when he makes a mistake, he doesn't beat himself up. But man, in the summertime, I thought it was going to be a real problem. And to his credit, he's worked on it a bunch.
Yeah, when you're looking at flaws with those guys, right? I think you mentioned his rebound rate, which isn't bad. I think he's pulling about 10 boards every 40 minutes. And with Smith, it's the blocks, right? But if you're Jabari Smith and you got Kessler out there protecting the rim, I don't know how much you need to try to do that. And likewise, I think when you're Walker Kessler and you've got Jabari Smith pulling down boards, I do wonder sometimes how much they kind of cannibalize from each other. Because it's not a luxury a lot of bigs have, right?
Yeah, that's true. I do think they cut into each other's numbers as far as that goes. But to me, Jabari is definitely a more refined player on the scoring end, and I think Walker is just so overwhelmingly a problem on the defensive end that you're right. Jabari, instead of trying to stop drives himself, he knows if I can funnel this toward number 13, he's probably going to emasculate somebody because that's what he does 22% of the time, and that's what happens. They've also got a thing going where they've done this, I think 3 or 4 games this year, where people try to zone them. And Walker has learned how to kind of take advantage of the backside zone principles and get open down on the block for like an alley-oop. And they ran the same damn play against St. Louis and scored, I think, 6 alley-oops. Did some of that against Alabama. They scored 4 against Florida. And he dropped a few against Georgia the other day, too. So, like, that's something you wouldn't normally see from a 7'1" center, as somebody who can all of a sudden – run a screen and then zip down the lane and take an alley-oop and 2 steps from the free throw line. I mean, he's learning to do that, and I think he can be an outstanding offensive player. He's good right now. It's just, I think to me, it's just, hey, let's pay more attention to shooting 2s instead of 3s at this point because it's 15%. It's just not worth it.
Jay, I've taken a ton of your time. You've been very generous with that. It's been fun. I want to give you the floor to type any loose ends, maybe mention anything with this Auburn team that you think is important that we didn't address, and also a couple of minutes to promote your site at Auburn Sports and any social media handles or anything like that that you'd like to promote as well.
You ain't got to you ain't got to do too much with that. I am the Commodore /publisher at auburnsports.com. So if you guys want to check out Auburn stuff on the Rivals Network, It's something Chris and I have in common. We both love Rivals, of course. You can check us out there, and I'm on Twitter at JG Tate. There on the Twitter, I got going on that very very early, so I've been around a while on Twitter, even though I use it less because I feel like it's kind of toxic.
Yeah.
Things about Auburn that I think are just worth mentioning, just in passing. Katie Johnson, if you're watching him play number 0 and you don't enjoy him, I worry about you. I think you might be watching the wrong sport because he's an absolute Tasmanian devil. He has super high work rates on offense and defense. He tips balls, he dunks balls, he shoots threes, he talks smack. He is to me the embodiment of all that's good about college basketball, and he's fun to watch. Big important part of their team. And I also want to give a shout out to Jalen Williams, who is their backup power forward, number 2, left-handed guy. He's a guy who came here with a lot of fanfare, and he's in his 3rd year now. He plays a little bit less each year just because they've been kind of stocking up with some superstar guys ahead of him. Never complains, never whines, busts his butt in practice, accepts his 15 to 18 minutes per game, and I'm shocked at how much he gets out of those 15 minutes or 18 minutes per game. He is what you want as a coach, and he's a heck of a basketball player, man. I mean, for somebody who doesn't play that much, again, he's probably their 7th guy. He's a pretty effective and valuable part of this team, and I think it's a great testament to the way he was raised, to the person he has made himself into, and for the kids who watch the team to understand that you've got to have guys like that to be great.
There are 2 Jalen Williamses in this league. Did you know that?
There are, yes.
Gets
The
confusing.
lefty and the righty.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Both good players. Well, Jay, thank you so much for your time. I am sure that as we get closer to tournament time, we'll want to catch up with you. Have a great weekend. Have fun down there in Auburn, and I think that's a game we're all going to be watching, and can't wait to see it.
There's no doubt, as Gus Malzahn would say, no doubt.
We miss Gus, don't we?
He's a good guy.
All right. He's Jay Tate of Auburn Sports. I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you again next week.